See, and I like
Waiting for the clock to turn to 7. Good evening, everyone. It's 7 o'clock. I'd like to call the meeting to order. If you could rise and join me in the pledge of the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We have a number of presentations this evening. Our first presentation is Megan Pitts on a proposed music trip.
Hello, everybody. I am here to propose or to highlight some of the activities that we planned for our music department trip for the high school this year. I do have copies of the itinerary that I would be happy to share if anybody would like to see it. Okay, good.
It's tentative. You know, work in progress.
So for this year's trip, we faced many, many challenges, as we did every single day in school. But the music teachers, Mrs. Sandville, Mr. Bardo, and I really wanted to give the kids a meaningful experience that was both safe, safe for them, safe for the teachers and the chaperones, as well as would provide them with great memories, because we know how important it is for kids to have those experiences. So as a department, we decided that Cleveland would be a great city because it is within a couple hours drive from home. That way, in case there was an emergency due to somebody getting sick, you know, with symptoms, we could more easily take care of them, have a parent come and get their child to avoid any sort of spreading of symptoms and things like that. So Cleveland is where we are proposing to go. We are going to spend the evening on our first night on Friday, May 20th at the Cleveland Guardians baseball game. They're playing the Tigers that night. Before that morning, we're doing a tour of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. We will check into the hotel, then we will go to the baseball game. We're gonna explore the stadium and have dinner, and then there's a fireworks show after the game. The next day, we're gonna spend the whole day pretty much at Cedar Point. The weather, hopefully, will be beautiful. The park opens, I think, the previous weekend, so we had to wait to schedule this trip based on when the park was opening. So spending the day at Cedar Point, and then the evening we're going to have a more relaxed night. We'll enjoy dinner at the hotel. We're working on possibly planning a special kind of group gathering for our seniors, depending on the layout of the hotel and if they have conference rooms. And then the next day is Sunday. We are going to have breakfast at the hotel, check out and spend a little time at the Cleveland Aquarium, and the kids just in self-guided groups will walk around the aquarium. I've seen that they have one of those tubes that you walk through and the fish and the sharks are swimming above you. And then after that we are going to have a brunch on a cruise ship called the Nautica Queen, and after that we will be getting back on the buses to come back home to Akron. We have 77 students from 9th through 12th grade who have signed up to go on this trip. We have our 3 music teacher chaperones plus those 6 AMP music parents that are going to be also joining us on this trip. As you can see, we have reservations made for the Holiday Inn, which is in downtown Cleveland, very centrally located to all the activities that we want to participate in. And we're going with DNF Travel as our bus company. I would like to answer anybody's questions if you have any.
What's the anticipated cost for the students? I know it's not finalized yet.
Not finalized yet. The last I heard.
It's 340.
340.
Plus, we have to do the food yet because we had to get the itinerary from the bus company on our directions on when we're going to get there, so we knew we were going to stop to come up with our price per student on the meals. But AMP's going to cover a lot of it. Actually, just so everyone here knows, AMP is paying for both the buses. We are not making the children pay one dime to travel because we're not doing our longer trip. So we are footing the bill for the buses for both of them.
Okay. Traditionally, there's always been a music performance on the trips. How did you
Yes.
decide to not include that?
Well, when we were trying to make plans, we were kind of in the middle of a surge in the pandemic, and we were talking with colleagues that we know at other schools and what their plans were, and everybody had the same consensus that we were afraid of planning a performance and then some of your very key musicians not being able to attend due to COVID or whatever. So we opted for more of a cultural trip, if you will. Other schools like Clarence High School chose that route as well. Our own Cindy McGarrah is the president of their Music Boosters, so she, in talking to her,
They're going to Boston.
yes, they're going to Boston, but they're not performing. So, looking back in hindsight, hindsight is 2020, maybe we could have snuck in a performance. We do definitely have enough students, but it was just kind of a fear of having a poor quality performance if certain kids were absent. That's why we chose not to do that.
Any other questions? All right. Thank you very much.
We are hoping for next year we're not taking the Disney World thing off the table for 4 years. Traditionally, it's every 4 years we go to Disney. So if things improve and if, everybody's health that's our #1 priority. If we're able to go to Disney, we would love to plan that for next school year or as soon as possible. So,
Okay.
thank you.
All right. The rest of our presentations are on the 22-23 budget. Most of the district administrators are here. Before we begin the presentations, Mr. McCabe has a few words.
Just by, excuse me, by way of introduction for the board, as you know from previous board meetings where we've had facilities, transportation, interscholastic sports present, this is part of our ongoing series of presentations to the board and the community, giving you as much detail as we can about what comprises our budget. This evening, you're going to be hearing from our instructional staff, our Director of Special Education, our building administrators, our interim Director of Technology, if you will, and our Director of Educational Services. What you will be hearing is the result of months of dialogue amongst the administrative team, including Mrs. Treader and myself, as well as ongoing discussions with our instructional staff on their needs. There had been on our budget development calendar the desire to present to you the food service budget for the upcoming year. However, we've been some recent developments that I want to share as to why we chose to table that portion of the presentation this evening, postpone it for a future date. First, there was an omnibus bill presented that indicated the USDA will no longer be providing free meals for every student. So that's a revenue source that was recently, after 2 years of doing that because of COVID, there's potential that legislation will go through and we won't have that revenue source. And secondly, as you've all seen in your trips to Tops or Wegmans or Pixley's, wherever you shop, commodity prices are fluctuating. So by waiting a little bit of time to see how that legislation may pan out, getting a firmer grasp of what our potential expenditures will be, we just want to use the cautionary approach and use some time so we present a budget that's well informed. It's important to note that the food service is self-funding. So in other words, the revenue they take in, either through sales or any federal dollars, help pay for the cost of food and the salaries. So it's always a unique part of the overall budget. So we will let you know. As I said this evening, we're going to start with Mr. Dunham, special ed, followed by our building administrators, and then Debbie Apolito for technology. We'll change gears, and Andrea Kirsten will present on curriculum as well as grant information. So, Jim, you're up.
Good evening. This special education budget is put together to maintain our current programming for related services, special ed programming in district and out of district. We continue to maximize our funding by cross-contracting with several districts nearby, so that is helping our expenditures for this budget and moving forward. So. As far as the salaries are concerned, they're pretty much maintaining the same. The only difference is I am recommending adding 0.5 FTE for a speech and language pathologist. The rationale behind that is due to increased demands. Obviously, with students being home the last 2 years, the use of language has diminished, which is causing not only the language concern, but articulation concerns with our younger ones. So, I am recommending a 0.5 FTE speech and language pathologist to move forward. As far as our travel and supply lines, they are maintaining the same. Tuition to other schools and BOCEs and private tuition, I am continuing to recommend the same level of funding at this point, like the 22-23 school year. So mine was pretty short and sweet. Any questions?
Some of the bucket moving, is that because of kids moving from building to building?
Yeah, so I have a group of students who moved from elementary to middle school, and that's why we have so many budget lines, is because mine is broken up by building for fiscal accountability.
Okay.
So.
And you're expecting, or at this point, anticipating the same relative number of students that will need services?
Yes. For this school year, we did have 5 high-need students move into the district, which, pretty much flatlined us as far as any buffer we did have. So we're maintaining that in hopes that we don't continue to have a large number of move-ins.
Okay. I do have a question, but not specifically for Mr. Dunham. Mr. Polkowski, Mrs. Treader, any updates you can provide about the discussions that have been happening at the state level about the ability of schools to establish a special ed reserve?
I do not have any updates on
No, I know that it was something that was advocated for. However, I don't believe that they've had any forward motion with it.
Okay. I just know that as students move, or that it creates a budget issue since we can't reserve for that.
Yeah, I don't think that proposal has gone anywhere at this point.
Sure.
Anything else?
Any other questions for Mr. Dunham? All right, thank you. Elementary school?
All right. First, I just want to thank, I got to bring this down. I'm the shortest of the administrative team, so I apologize, guys. You're going to have to lift it up later. First, I want to thank all of you for listening and considering the needs of the elementary school as we navigate this critical time in the lives of our students, really what is the future. And I do genuinely feel it's one of the most critical times we've faced. What I've done is I've divided this into 2 areas. The first being the general supplies needed to best function as an elementary school, and the second in relation to staffing needs. So the elementary school program, although from a supply standpoint, it's largely unchanged from the 21-22 budget, but what I've done is I've highlighted increases and decreases and what those pertain to. The first of which is there's two lines that fall under supervision. The function of the office in the elementary building, the consumables, the office supply needs, and then the other line relates more to the administrative side of things where it's most notably professional development opportunities, attendance at the St. East State Conference, dues for the Western New York Elementary Principals Association, and what we hope is projected for both myself and Caroline is some professional development in the area of science and reading. The second area is the instructional lines. You can see that there's a decrease of $1,100 there. That is really related most directly to, we had some furniture areas that were in need, like teacher desks, or not teacher chairs, easels in the classroom, horseshoe tables, things like that, that we removed from this line. And then there was an addition of $900 for classroom periodicals, mostly due to the fact that Weekly Reader and Scholastic News have increased in price. And so it's an $1,100 decrease, but really it's because we moved some furniture needs out of that line. The next areas, there was an increase in the specials area. That was most notably due to an increase of $630 related to the music band, and that was for instrumental repair and cleaning. For some reason, that was not part of last year's budget, and Mrs. Komozinski made sure that I was fully aware of it. The library lines really are not really driven by us, they're driven by state aid. There was a decrease in the library aid that was given, and so that's why you see that large decrease there. We are making up the difference in some other ways through some use of the funding through, Andrea, is it through the ARPA funds that we had that money to, the $11,000, is that what it was? I don't know if it was SRSA or ARPA.
For which process?
For the $4,000 for the, we're gonna use it for summer school, but then it's gonna translate to the library.
Oh, but that was using SRSA.
SRSA, okay. So we're making up the difference for that. The other area is student services, which is largely unchanged. That's character education needs that we have in the building as it relates to No Name Calling Week, our bucket filling program that we do at the elementary school. A summary of all of that is there's an overall decrease of $5,870, but I do want to note that that is largely due to the fact that there's a much lower aidable amount being given through for libraries. So really it's an increase of $380 at the elementary school. The next area, as I mentioned earlier, our elementary instructional staffing, and we are proposing the increase of 1 classroom teacher. That is largely due to the fact that since the beginning of the school year, or roughly August 27th, we have added, and I'm going to update this because we had a new student this week, we've added 49 students, which is, it's a compliment to our district because people want to go to school here, but it is unheard of for us to add that many people from the beginning of the school year to this point. So we are proposing the addition of 1 classroom teacher. It most directly would relate to kindergarten. Our kindergarten enrollment from the beginning of this school year, which on 8/20 was 71 students, has increased up to now what is 89 students with the addition of a student this week, which makes our classroom sizes in kindergarten at 22 and 23, which is just way too high for a kindergarten classroom, especially with the needs of students that are incoming. Right now, our current registration for kindergartens is 70, which is pretty much the same number it was at this time last year. We typically add about 10 students. This year, we added 20 students, so we're anticipating anywhere between 10 and 20 students being added. And the next slide just kind of gives you a summary of this year's current classroom sizes and are projected for next year. And you can see the kindergarten classroom sizes with the asterisk. It would be 18 if we added 10. It would be 19 if we added 15. So, any questions?
Certainly, the increase in enrollment is encouraging.
It's a positive thing, no question about it. But it brings challenges with it.
Absolutely.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Just as we're waiting for Mr. Caper to come up, you notice the exchange between Mrs. Kirsten and Mr. Esposito, and I'm glad that happened, kind of serendipitously. It demonstrates not only the communication, but the ways in which we're managing the federal funds, and I know Andrea is going to be speaking to that point a little bit later tonight.
So good evening, thank you for having us tonight. Our middle school proposed budget would increase by $3,000 for the year, our supply line budget. Each year Akron Middle School stays under our approved budget with responsible spending. We'd like to use some of our supply budget money to provide Kagan training for all of our faculty, or as much as possible. I know Andrea has set up Kagan training for this summer, but sometimes in the summer you have somebody who's on vacation or a family issue, so we would like to train people who cannot attend as many as possible during the school year. The other thing we would like to use the increase of supply money on, I don't know if anyone has noticed, but our school, it's accented in a red color. And I'm not sure why they did that. The lockers are red, the trim is red. So what we'd like to do is purchase a wall wrap that is orange and black. We're proud of our school colors and we would like to showcase our school colors. The other thing I want to touch on is middle school technology. The middle school technology budget remains at $6,200. In computer science, there will be needs for updates and modifications to the physical programming part of the class. This includes purchasing add-ons for MBOTs and replacement parts. In 7th grade, engineering and robotics requires additional consumable materials for students to use, as well as replacement kits and sufficient storage units for projects as we continue to build the BEX robotics program. Excuse me. And finally, creative design and engineering will continue to require the same level of consumable supplies and updated equipment. In creative design and engineering, we touch on engineering design challenges, 3D printing, agriculture, automation, and robotics. Any questions? All right, thank you.
Thank you. High school?
Good evening, everyone. So I just want to start off by saying last year at this time, the high school really dropped our full budget, our total budget 10%. So the goal this year coming in was to try to recoup some of those losses last year and really work with the departments to figure out what their needs were and try to meet those needs. So through all the conversations with all the department heads at the high school, we really came up with a needs-based budget. And I think trying to meet their needs as much as possible with some of the new innovative things that we have in the classroom. So again, my goal was to get our vitalized lines up to that pre-pandemic increase, which from 2020 to 2022 in some cases could be 20%, but that's because last year we really, in some of the lines, did not increase and actually dropped 10%. So again, trying to recoup some of those losses over the last couple of years. The biggest really increase in my budget, you'll see, is through the equipment line. And one of the biggest reasons was because we decided to have a replenishment plan for our instruments. So we have a 5-year plan for both band and orchestra to really start replenishing a lot of those instruments that are over 40 years old. And really it's about time. So I know Mr. Bardo has actually, I've passed this out. This is just a brief summation of what his proposals are regarding some of the instrument costs. And you can see, as you look on the far right side, it's a cursory look, but, there's nothing under $1,800, and, it could be up to $8,000 to $10,000 to $12,000 for a tuba. So, the equipment costs for instruments is really expensive. So again, being mindful that we're not going to be able to replace them all at once, but to have a plan similar to what we do in athletics. We have a uniform plan for every 5 years, so it's kind of the same concept. How we want to try to replace and replenish as we see fit. So
So are you saying that a lot of these instruments that we are using currently are pre-1980?
correct. Yep.
1970.
Year I was born. So they're old. Another huge cost really is actually just come up the last few weeks. So we have a laser printer through technology that Mr. Klaus uses, and unfortunately there must have been a short that happened in the system, and there was it has caused a small fire in the laser printer, and it's completely destroyed. So that is really critical for him. He uses it on a day-to-day basis in his CAD program. So we're working with technology and with Mrs. Treader to try to figure out how to purchase one of those printers, which probably cost $22,000. We did find that it could be aidable, BOE is aidable, so we might get a reimbursement on that, but it's something that's critical for his program that he uses on a daily basis. So we feel that's really a need, that we need to replace that for next year as well. Similar to Mr. Esposito in the elementary, there was a 50% decrease in the aidable library book line, so we did replace that and put that $5,000 into the supply line to replenish, so she's able to purchase the periodical license and actual periodicals. So though it has decreased and cut in half, we did replenish it through the supply line. Another big purchase would be for our math department, buying the T84 calculators. And for business, we're gonna purchase one more POS system, which is a point of sale system. Right now, Ms. Saley runs our entrepreneurship class, and she has one point of sale machine that you can run your credit card through. So for us to be able to expedite purchases and transactions, we're gonna order one more, so she'll have two when she's on satellite locations. In science classes, we're gonna order, hopefully, some mini solar panels for our science labs, as well as a water purifying system for our chemistry and AP classes, as well as some of our bio classes that will use that as well for their labs. And then there's a pretty big increase in our high school supply line, but I think, warranted. One of the big things that we did through this pandemic is we wanted to honor our seniors. So one of the things that we did, I think it was a huge hit, were the senior banners that we put up in the village. We want to make that an annual occurrence, so we want to put that in our budget so it does happen every year for our seniors. It's a really great tribute to have every one of them up in the village and be displayed that whole month of June before graduation. So that's something we wanted to make happen as well. And some other increases were again, we have a new learning center this year, which is extremely popular, and it's getting rave reviews, and we want to be able to supply them with anything they need in terms of instructional resources. So that's a little bit more regarding what they may need for the ALC. So other than that, future considerations, for technology, again, we have a robotics class that we may need to outfit some new robotics gear, which is pretty expensive. We're doing fine now by using replacement parts for some of the machinery, but we may need to have to purchase some more kits. And as Mr. Caprio had said, one of my goals too for the building is it is really an old building. It's beautiful, but to try to really improve some aesthetics in the entryways and some of the hallways, and really do it across the district. So that would be some future considerations for us to be able to work on as a team to really work on our aesthetics in the overall building. So, any questions?
I like the idea of the instrument replacement plan, as we've talked about with athletics. It's important to have good equipment.
Absolutely, yeah. And especially, being over 40 or 45 years old, those instruments, they just wear down just like uniform too, so.
Right.
And I'm happy that we're going to continue that tradition of those senior banners.
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah.
Kids love them, parents love them. It's awesome. Thank you.
Thank you. Technology?
Hello, everyone. I haven't met all of you. I'm Debbie Appolito, filling in the technology department. And I want to go over a little bit of the budget that we've got tonight. Thank you, Mike. So we have got some increases. One of the big ones in equipment is $62,000, and that is actually a project that was started back in January before the pandemic hit. And it is a project that will update the radio system across the district. So that's the administrators, security across the district. And that is a follow-up to a project that was done pre-pandemic for the transportation radio. So it's just completing that project. It will give us a little more functionality, $62,000 for that. We also got hit with some decreases in some of our aid, and that's in the areas of hardware and software. So there's a small decrease, about $1,000 in hardware and about $1,400 in software. So those were something that we took a cut, and we're going to try to get by with those the way those came through. We have a few updates in our contractual lines. There's several different areas in that. It's a total of $34,000. That includes purchasing a new server that will help with our security camera playback speeds. We've got all of these security cameras now. We want to make sure we've got a system that plays back, has high quality, good resolution, and good response time for our administrators and people pulling security camera footage. We also, in that code, have added in the renewal of our frontline time and attendance application. That's not purchased through BOE, so we rolled that into the technology budget. That will be an annual renewal for our frontline system. We also, the cameras that were installed across the district as part of the building project are reaching the end of their warranty period. So we have put in a $10,000 line in the budget that will cover maintenance, time and material type of maintenance for those cameras. Hopefully, we won't need that much, but we need that so we can keep that camera system up and running. That falls under contractual. We increased our supply line slightly. A lot of that supply line these days is keeping the parts in stock that we need to repair Chromebooks. Now that we're 1-to-1 K-12, we do all those repairs in-house, so we use that to purchase repairs for the screens, broken keyboards, things that happen to the Chromebooks that aren't under warranty. The BOCES line is one of our big increases, and one of the big pieces of that this year is we are finally going to have the opportunity to upgrade our teacher computers, and the computers are in classrooms. The elementary is our first update, and we're actually going to do that now. We've ordered those computers. That'll be done this spring. Those computers, most of them, are 9 to 10 years old. So we've kept them going along the best we can, but we've got an opportunity. We're going to upgrade those this spring, and then there's also money in the BOCES budget to do phase 2, which will be the middle school and some of the labs in the high school. So that's in the BOCES budget. And we also took a really good look at software this year, and there are some software programs that we've been purchasing out of various codes across the district that we're going to roll into BOCES to take advantage of that BOCES aid. We're going to leverage that aid every way that we can. So that's another reason that particular line went up a little bit. I also wanted to take a minute just to let you know that we've done some other projects with some of the current year savings. So I've been working with Mrs. Treader, and we have worked with our BOCES resources, and we're going to use our BOCES aid, and we're going to also leverage our E-rate aid, which is a very limited aid. It only applies to certain network pieces. So we're going to take those two pieces of aid together, and we're going to update all of the network switches across the district to get us up to where we can do 10 gig speeds to the server. And we're also going to replace all of our wireless access points. So that is, that's a big project. We're going to try to get that done this spring, and that will get us aid from BOCES for next year, and we leverage the E-rate aid right off of the price of those up front. So we're going to get a lot of bang for our buck on that one. We are also, as I mentioned, refreshing the elementary computers. Those have been ordered and hopefully will be in in the next month or so, and we'll start getting those pushed out to our teachers, our offices, the nurses, business office, any office that is in the elementary end of the building will be being refreshed. We are going to make a couple of updates in the server room. One is we have a fiber optic cable that runs from a core switch and a stack of other equipment that's out in the outside area of the tech room. We're going to run new fiber into the actual server room, which is a more secure area, and move that equipment inside. It's going to help us with audits and just a security level. So that's going to happen this spring. And then the last thing is we are going to add access control to that server room. Right now it's just a key, a master key to get in there, but there's no way to track who's gone in and out or through that room. So we'll put door access swipes like we have at the entrance to the building so we can track time of entry and who goes in there. So that's also going to be completed. And then the last big purchase for us, of course, is the Chromebooks that we need for our students for the rotation for next school year. And that's where the grants are going to come in and help us with that, which is why we've been able to do some of these other projects. And Andrea will talk about that. Any questions?
How many-year project is the staff computer upgrade? You talked about the elementary school, the middle school.
So it's a compressed three cycle plan, and we're doing the elementary first. We're doing it in the age of the computers.
Okay.
Middle school will be second, and that will be, the high school's a large building, so we're going to pull some of the high school, the labs out, combine that with the middle school. And then hopefully, if everything is good at the end of next year, we can maybe finish that up a year from now. So
Okay.
hopefully get that all in a year.
Thank you.
Anything else? All right, thank you.
Would you like to update us on the calendar, Mr. McKay?
Yeah, just if you will, thank you, Mr. Schreiber. Giving you a quick snapshot of where we are in the process. Obviously, this evening being at the top of the line, what I like about this process is every time we get to delete a line, and you can see we're coming closer and closer to the finish. So at our next meeting, we'll have the full budget draft for your consideration. Then the official hearing on May 10th, I won't read all the dates. The big one that sticks out, obviously, is the May 17th annual budget and board elections vote. So keep this timeline. Next, we have Mrs. Kirsten.
Okay, just one question for Mrs. Treader. How is the state aid projections firming up? I know the budget's due in the 2 days after we meet.
We're still basing all of our estimates off of the governor's proposals. We don't anticipate that to drop. We still have a 0% increase in the budget. I have to really compliment Mrs. Eppolito, who's been phenomenal at any measure. And we've been able to leverage current savings in a way that's going to generate additional goals and save the state that we're even aware of, obviously, because they don't know what we're doing this year. So that's going to bolster our aid numbers for next year. It's going to help fund what we need to do next year. So we're getting a triple bang for our buck, which is really great. So next meeting, I will bring you all the full revenue estimates. I'll bring you the full expenditure model, and then we'll ask for the board's adoption of those numbers so we can get all of our disclosures done. But it's a good budget year. Everyone's worked really hard, and the puzzle pieces are fitting together nicely. So I'm anxious to present to you next.
Okay, great, thank you. We're going to switch gears, Mrs. Kirsten.
Okay, so I have about 55 slides to prepare or to explain. I'm kidding. It's only 19, so 19 doesn't seem so bad after I said 55. But I did want to share both the curriculum and instruction budget as well as give an update on grants. Not only because I'm required to update you on grants every 6 months, but truly the puzzle pieces do work together to paint a larger picture. Before I begin, just want to again thank the technology department, Mrs. Eppolito. She has put in so many hours, a tremendous savings the district will see over time in regards to the software purchases that we will now be putting through the BOCES budget. So tremendous long range implications with that. So thank you. And also thank the administrative team who not only met with me once, but then again with the technology department, and then again with myself and Mrs. Treader as we looked at not only this year's budget, but how our long-range plan will work and how we will spend responsibly as the grant funds go away over the course of the years. So, without any further ado, talking a little bit about our curriculum and instruction budget. You will not see a great number of changes this year. I will go through some of the highlights, but this is part of our every year spending through both these as well as our own district general fund. But this focuses on the professional development for teachers, administrators, compensation for teachers who work on curriculum projects. That particular area has become particularly important throughout the course of the pandemic, as it has been more challenging to get substitutes in the building. So we've had to kind of rethink how we do some of the things we are doing in regards to professional development, instructional materials and supplies, textbook purchases, software purchases, as well as those purchases that we spend through BOCES and then eventually get aid back on that money. There are a couple of new additions this year that I'll talk about in the next slide. So there's just a few budget areas that you will notice changes in this year, one of which is in the contractual line. I know it's a goal of Mr. McCabe, myself, our administrative team, to focus on our administrative professional development plan. And so the $3,000 does allow us to participate in an administrative retreat, focusing on our PD goals as a group. You will notice an increase in the travel expenditures. We are implementing this year a program that has been very successful. We started to implement Kagan instruction. In the middle school, it's become extremely popular, but our instructional coaches have received training through Erie One BOCES and have started integrating this professional development throughout the course of our building, or our district. So we do have a unique opportunity for our instructional coach to become a trainer. So this will be train the trainer professional development. So she will travel, become a certified Kagan trainer. The process takes a little bit over a year, but again, having her in the district will have a long-term fiscal advantage for us.
Mrs. Kirsten, if I, just for the board and any community, can you just briefly describe Kagan? Because we say Kagan, we all know what it means.
Yeah, so
but
it would
it's
be
the impact in the classroom,
my
the child's
pleasure.
experience.
Yep, so Kagan does not focus on what we teach, but how we deliver that instruction. So the philosophy behind Kagan is that it's very collaborative, focuses on student engagement. If you walk into a classroom that's implementing Kagan strategies, you will immediately notice it. Table or desks are no longer in rows. Students are working in groups. There have been some really creative workarounds in regards to the pandemic and how we are still able to deliver those Kagan protocols. But it's focused on student engagement and interaction, less teacher in the front of the classroom. The planning comes on the teacher's part. The students are doing the hard work in the classroom. So less teacher in front of the room, more students learning from each other with the resources that teachers provide and the protocols teachers provide. So it's been extremely popular so far for the teachers that have been a part of this process. And so we want to continue that momentum and strategically use some grant funding as well to support that training. In regards to the BOCES budget, we are joining the Community Schools COSER this year. And what that will do is it will allow us, we utilize HealthWorks right now for our student physicals. This Community Schools COSER is relatively new, and it will allow us to provide those students using our current school, or that service using our current school physician as part of the BOCES COSER, so we will eventually get aid back on that money. So that's just one new addition, and then the other addition is we are including a data specialist in the budget this year. For a variety of reasons, the district is participating in strategic planning. Data is one of those areas that our teachers, administrators have all indicated that we want to improve our skills within, as well as it's required as part of the grant funding. Sorry, I'm having a little bit of asthma. In regards to the nurses' budget, you won't see any dramatic changes in this budget, just typical expenditures due to salary increases. Okay, so now we're going to get into the grant funding. So I want to talk a little bit about federal grants. So there's the traditional grants that we have always been a part of, our title grants that we participate in every year. So those title grants have a combined amount of $270,000 approximately that our school applies for and receives annually. There's very specific criteria for how we're eligible for those funds, as well as specific criteria for how we spend that money. Now, new as far as federal-related COVID grants, our district has been awarded over $4 million in grant funding. So that funding is divided into several different sources. Each one of these sources have specific rules and requirements on how that money can be spent. So when we're talking about puzzle pieces, it's like 4 million puzzle pieces that all need to fit together, part of a larger district plan. So just wanted to quickly review our ESSA funding, our Every Student Succeed Acts funding. You might refer to that as title funding. So our middle school and elementary school are considered to be title schools. That is based specifically on socioeconomic status as well as academic intervention needs of our students. And those funds must be spent on basic school improvement. So you can see an overview of how we're currently using those funds. Title II is to support effective instruction. We're paying a portion of our instructional coach's salary through that particular grant line. And then lastly, Title IV focuses on student social, emotional, mental health, and we are funding a social worker in part through that funding line. So this is not all-inclusive of all of our federal grants. Mr. Dunham oversees the 611, 619 grant focused on special education students. And then we also have additional grant funding that supports our Native American students. Okay, Governor's Emergency Education Relief Fund. So Congress awarded states over $3 billion in funding. Each state received their portion, and the states that applied and were accepted did receive this money. So for us, it was about $68,000, and we used those funds to purchase cafeteria tables that would allow for social distancing. Many of our cafeteria tables were pretty much at their end of life, so they needed to be replaced anyway. But also, as part of the original plan, we had students in the building every other day, and we had all these extra desks that we needed to find room to store, and extra tables that we needed to store to promote that social distancing, so we wanted to purchase storage containers. Unfortunately, they aren't available, but that also gives us a new opportunity to adjust our plan and spend those funds in different ways. SRSA is another funding source. It's about $70,000. It's an extension of the CARES Act. So those states that were approved as far as the governor's relief spending were also awarded SRSA money. So to give you an overview, this is where that Kagan professional development training comes in. We're going to have a fantastic opportunity over the summer to bring in a Kagan PD specialist and invite our teachers to participate in that training. All of you remember we administered a survey not too long ago on how, to families, teachers, administrators, what are some of the needs of our district? And pretty much universally, creating a positive school environment, positive school culture. SRSA funds will allow us to bring in a Safe and Civil Schools program or similar program that really focuses on developing a positive environment in the school, paying attention to the behaviors we want to see more of, and really fine-tuning a multi-tiered system of support to support students in the areas they need. Strategic planning, we've presented to the board about. The data support that is associated with that professional development or with that strategic planning. This year we paid for using grant funding. We have an opportunity to get aid back on that data specialist. So we moved that into the BOCES budget for next year because there were some other areas of identified need that we could use the monies for that wouldn't be aidable. So I'll explain that in a second. E-Academy for those students who had a medical reason for why they couldn't attend in person, as well as the technology purchases. So Chromebooks and interactive displays as part of a multi-year replacement plan. Staffing is another opportunity, or source of funding was another opportunity for us in regards to staffing. We focused on positions that were shorter term positions, knowing that these funds would be depleted in 2023. So we had a .5 academic learning center coordinator. That teacher retired in December, but she did an excellent job with her leadership in developing our academic learning center. We budgeted for a teacher assistant in the elementary school as class number sizes started to increase in kindergarten. But that new need that we identified were building-based substitutes in each of the buildings for next year. So as I mentioned, I had the opportunity to help out in the middle school just a little bit, and it was tremendous. The needs of the building as substitutes weren't available, and how everyone was working together to fill those spaces. But it did have an impact on professional development. It had an impact in the classroom. So our hopes is by creating these building-based substitute positions in each of the building, there's a preferred substitute rate of pay. Substitutes show up every day. They do have the opportunity to purchase benefits, but somebody that can come in the building every day, knows our teachers, knows our students, and can literally pick up where the teacher left off, because that non-interruption of instruction is incredibly important and really necessary as part of our professional development plans. Okay, so the big grants, the American Rescue Act, ARPA funding. So ARPA funding, states received ARPA funding to be used not only for education, but for a variety of different things. And in the areas that were most heavily and critically impacted by the pandemic. Housing was an example, healthcare industry was an example, but also education was heavily impacted by the pandemic. So as part of New York State's ARPA funds, 90% of those funds went directly to school districts, and we were required, or the state was required, to set aside 10% of those funds to use at their discretion, specifically to address the impact of learning loss due to the pandemic. So each of these have separate sets of rules, guidelines, instructions. They're very, very specific. As part of the ARPA funding, New York State, 20% of that money was set aside. 14% needed to be used for summer programs. 14% needed to be used for after-school programs. For Akron, it's about $150,000 for each of those areas. But it really gives us the opportunity this upcoming summer, through planning with the building principals, to not only run a full summer school program, but to also provide additional enrichment opportunities for our students. Pretty excited about that. The after-school tutoring program literally will allow students, as a district, we have thousands of hours of tutoring opportunities available to us between now and 2024 for those experts who know our students the best, to work with them, small group, one-on-one, to help them in the areas that they need it the most, very targeted. So with these guidelines, again, very specific, they needed to be evidence-based interventions, and we are required to monitor the success of those interventions and then modify and adjust our plan as necessary. We needed to focus on how we're going to address lost instructional time, the social, emotional, mental health needs of our students, and originally that plan had a major focus on how we can return to in-person instruction. So fortunately, we are there, and it gives us an opportunity to use those funds in a very targeted way. If we developed a plan in 2021, if everything remained in place between now and 2024, we aren't doing this right. So it needs to involve stakeholders, it needs to involve strategic planning, it needs to involve the use of data systems and collaboration to really modify and adjust our plans to promote student achievement within our district. Okay, and as I mentioned, one of those requirements was a stakeholder survey. We not only had the survey, we had multiple meetings, we saw several themes prevail, data systems, social emotional pieces, student engagement, enrichment opportunities. Those were reoccurring themes in all of our stakeholder areas. You may have remembered we gave a board presentation back in June on the results of those surveys. But now we need to continue to gain that input. So myself, Mr. Close, we're working on a system. Coming very, very soon, we'll send out a blast. We'll have an actual button on our website that parents, community members, teachers can just click on and give your thoughts, input on the most effective ways for us to utilize those funds. It's ARP ESSER. CIRSA was early literacy programs. ARP ESSER is specific to summer reading libraries that can be used beyond the summer, but also obviously throughout the course of the school year. Summer school programs, materials and supplies, PPE equipment, as well as every year we're replacing more of those Chromebooks, so additional Chromebooks and interactive display boards as part of that multi-year replacement plan. There are several staffing implications related to ARP ESSER funding. You see them listed there. We have an academic learning center teacher at the high school. There's actually 2 listed, but it's important to note that a TA position was dissolved in order to, again, with the specific needs of the building, integrate another high school ALC teacher, teacher assistants at each of the building, a wellness teacher, and then a social emotional coordinator through Best Self. And our hope is with that particular position, it will be self-funded over time. Additionally, we have an AIS teacher at the elementary school and an AIS teacher at the middle school as well. So again, many conversations have been had about long-range planning and how to successfully phase out some of the expenditures over the course of the grant to spend responsibly. So that is it in a nutshell. I mean, that was 19 slides, pretty fast, right? Do you have any questions for me in regards to any of those many slides?
The .5 wellness teacher, is that one for every building? Is that one for the whole district?
That is one for the district.
And what does that mean? What will they do?
So that position, he's now currently .5 wellness, .5 health teacher.
Okay.
We anticipate that will eventually become a full-time health teacher position, but currently he plays a key role on our MTSS, or in our MTSS process. He is assisting with professional development. He's assisting with our staff development day on Friday. Some student surveys that were administered to gauge the social emotional health and well-being of our students. He's working very closely with Val S., who's not only our technology integrator, but has a background in social emotional health and wellness, as well as our Sierra, our Best Self integrator, SEL integrator. Any other questions?
No.
All right.
Thank you.
you.
Thank you all for your presentations. I know how much work goes into getting to a 5-minute presentation on your budget. Thank you for your efforts. Next on our agenda is the hearing of individuals and delegations. We have no pink cards this evening, so we'll move on to committee reports. Recreation Board. Ms. Forstell?
The last meeting was February 3rd. I don't have anything recent. We haven't had a meeting yet. So this is kind of outdated. But I'll just read it anyway. I wasn't able to attend due to lack of heat. My furnace broke. So this is what you need, you know. So they went over the agenda. Colleen provided the finance statements. The year end was 11K. The expenditures for January were 3K. In addition, the total of registrants for Newstead Recreation Department was 378. Due to some cancellations on Thursday, they requested to extend pickleball and volleyball. And that was about it. So I know they're getting ready for summer and spring, so,
Okay.
but there hasn't been a meeting yet.
All right, thank you. ECASB delegate, our next meeting's April. Legislative, Mr. Polkowski?
Our next meeting will be coming up. The only item I want to share is I had brought it to the attention of Mr. McCabe earlier in the year, and I just had a teacher reach out in regards to it, but because it is it's associated with legislative, is that the Erie County Board of Elections runs a program in which they allow, will come out with a voting machine and set up balloting for your high school. So when you're running your elections for your class president, vice president, treasurer, so on and so forth, they will actually go through and set up a ballot similar to you and I going into the polls. We'll explain how the whole process works and then encourage them to utilize that equipment in the process of voting for their own candidates. So it gives them exposure to real-world situations. With that in mind, we do have a member of the community who is part of the Erie County Board of Elections who had extended, we've had a conversation, and we're in the process of trying to establish that to offer that to our students in the high school this year. So it's just kind of they're going to be 18 and they're going to be able to vote. You might as well learn the process and become part of the understanding of how it works. So it's
Very nice.
So it's associated with legislative, and that's where we're at. So.
All right, great. Budget and Finance, Mr. Kenline?
The budget was forwarded to the Executive Committee. No increase in ECASB dues to the member districts next year. And most of the changes to the budget were internal to the organization, salaries and things like that. But the good news for us is no increase.
Right, thank you. Native American, Ms. Forstel?
I don't have anything, I wasn't able to attend.
Okay. Mr. McCabe, would you like to add anything on Native American?
Just in regards to the Native American Committee, we are working on using the My Brother's Keeper grant to offer and provide opportunities for our Native American students to engage in STEM activities. I happened to be walking down the hall when Mr. Mount Pleasant was working with the kids, and I said it was one of those learning moments when I could hear the buzz of activity even before I got to the classroom door. I walked in and our Native American students were doing a robotics activity, building some contraption, a vehicle of some sort. We're working, Ms. Kirsten is taking the lead, working to expand opportunities for our Native American kids to receive Seneca language instruction as an after-school program on the reservation. So we're working on a collaborative arrangement with them. This coming Friday, I'll be addressing in my superintendent report, though, is our Superintendent Day Conference, and it's the next step in the process of expanding our own awareness and ability and capacity to work with Native American students and their families through our professional development. So by and large, that was most of what we talked about at our last committee meeting.
Thank you. So continuing on, Superintendent's report.
Continuing on, I just want to first start by thanking the administrative team for presenting this evening and all the work. Mrs. Treader, for your ongoing guidance and support and all of this. It's been a true team effort. I'm very proud to be working alongside of each and every one of them. Some things to share. You heard Mrs. Kirsten say about gathering input from the community. As you are aware, as part of the strategic planning process, we submitted a survey out to every stakeholder in the district and received really remarkable feedback. Over 1,600 people responded. To give you a sense, there were 500 parents who completed the survey. There were 146 teachers, 58 non-instructional staff, 280 elementary kids, grades 3, 4, 5, and 628 middle school and high school kids, grades 6 through 12. So hopefully all of you had the opportunity to participate in the survey as well. That survey data will be coming to the district soon. We have actually a planning meeting with Dr. Stevenson on Friday. We're taking a little break from the superintendent meeting, or planning day, professional development day, to meet with her. The next step in the process, and this is why we like the opportunity to work with our survey consultant, she is going to be gathering small groups of stakeholders. So there will be a parent group. There will be an elementary 3 through 5 student group, multiple secondary student groups to work with middle school and high school students, a teacher group, and the non-instructional group. Over that last week, she'll have 90-minute sessions to discuss with them, what did the data tell you, and really go deeper into dialogue as part of her final report to the district on where are our areas of strength, what are the identified areas of need. And that information will then be used as we work with Erie One BOCES and the Board of Education to develop our strategic plan. I think you heard through the conversations this evening in the budget, I think we have a sense already of where that survey data will lead us. We talk about more engaging instruction, we talk about school climate and educational needs. From there, we'll say, okay, this is what our community, our stakeholders would like to see us in 2 to 3 years. What are the action steps we need to take? How will they be funded by the budget process? As you heard again this evening, Mrs. Treadner and I have had ongoing conversations about the logical marriage of the strategic plan with the district's budget. So just giving you an update on where we are. Again, the data dives will happen at the end of the month. And then from there, we'll work on our strategic planning throughout the remainder of this year and into next year.
Mr. McCain?
Yeah.
How are the participants in these groups going to be determined? Is it volunteers?
Sure, great question. We asked for the building administrators to consider their parent groups, and we wanted a broad representation of the district. So not just maybe the parent that attends every PTA or sporting event. We wanted a broad representation. The nice thing about being such a small district is our administrators know their families very, very well. And so they solicited and reached out. Likewise with the teachers, we wanted to make sure there was balanced representation across the buildings and grade levels. Frankly, I don't know how you guys picked the kids, but I think you did the same thing as with the parents. You tried to get that cross, they're all nodding their heads, so getting that cross section, not the students that are necessarily in student government every year, but really a broader cross section. And the non-instructional, we basically surveyed them again and said, we're looking for someone to represent facilities, someone to represent transportation, someone to represent food service, clerical, 2 representatives from each, and it was a volunteer basis. So again, the idea with those individuals in the data dives is to represent the mosaic of people that we have across the district. Wanted to make sure the board had an opportunity to take a look at the attached draft meeting dates for next year. If you have feedback from me now, that's great. We'll certainly take and make revisions where necessary. If not, if you could just let us know if you have any issues.
Works for me.
Yeah, they're similar to this year. I mentioned a few moments ago that this Friday is our superintendent conference day. I've attached the agenda for your reference. I wanted you to note again that a major focus is enhancing our understanding of our Native American students and their families, their history, and most importantly, our capacity to work with them. The training that we have done thus far, from the summer to opening day, has been exceedingly well received. And I'm talking about not just from the instructional, the transportation department. So this is wonderful. I've worked alongside these fellow citizens in our area for so long, and there's so much I didn't know. I really appreciate this opportunity. So again, Friday is focused on the instructional staff. They will be broken up between elementary and secondary, approximately in a 2.5-hour training, morning or afternoon, depending on when they're scheduled. Opposite of that training, we have an a la carte menu for staff to select. And many of our administrators are going to be facilitating some of the trainings. Our teachers will be facilitating trainings as well. The focus there is on social and emotional, mental health, and wellness. So we have some opportunities for our staff to get a little enjoyment, if you will, and feeding their own soul, but hopefully also taking those ideas and then using them within their own classrooms. I do want to thank all of our volunteers. It's amazing when there's a call, a request for help. Mrs. Kirsten put it out there, and the number of people willing to step up and do something to present to their colleagues. Briefly, a few final points. A COVID update, some great news. It's been 2.5 weeks since we've returned from break. There's only been 3 positive cases. So those are numbers that, gosh, we haven't seen since the very beginning. Let's hope that trend continues. At our last board meeting, I mentioned that one of our filters, our content filters in technology, wasn't functioning the way we would like, and our kids had found a workaround. I want to let you know over the break that problem was rectified again. Debbie, thank you for your leadership in that. We went to a new filtering system called iBoss. It's much more effective. Initially, when you install a new content filter, it really overblocks, and there were some educational websites that teachers couldn't get to. Quick fix by notifying the technology department, and we release the block on those sites. We release the filter so we can have it. So again, 21st century learning, technology is a powerful tool. We want to make sure our kids have access to it, but access to it in the safest ways possible. And staying away from TikTok while they're in school. And finally, one last point. I just want to thank our student musicians, our student actors, the cast, the crew, our staff for the outstanding work they did in our musical. The Theory of Relativity, I had no idea what to expect. I didn't even know it was going to be so humorous, so engaging. The combination of storytelling and music and the way it came together and our kids on stage, it was outstanding. So congratulations to all of them.
Okay, thank you. Moving on in our agenda, item 6, personnel instructional. Our recommended action is that the Akron Central School Board of Education, upon the recommendation of Patrick D. McCabe, Superintendent of Schools, hereby approves instructional items 6A to 6E. Moved, Ms. Forstell.
Second.
Second, Mrs. Bragg. Questions or comments?
Motion carried.
All right. I'd just like to thank and congratulate Mr. Butler for his 33 years of service upon his retirement at the end of the year from the district. Item 7, personnel non-instructional. Our recommended action is that the Akron Central School Board of Education, upon the recommendation of Patrick D. McCabe, Superintendent of Schools, approve the non-instructional items, consent items 7A to 7S.
Move.
Moved, Mrs. Kay.
Second.
Seconded, Mr. Massey. Questions or comments?
Motion carried.
All right. I'd like to also congratulate Mr. Richardson upon his retirement and thank him for his many, many years of service.
35.
What's that?
35.
35, thank you. Item 8,
Generational employee.
yes. District items. Our recommended action is that the Akron Central School Board of Education, upon the recommendation of Patrick D. McCabe, Superintendent of Schools, does hereby approve district items consent 8A to 8D. Move, Ms. Forstell.
Second.
Second, and Mr. Polkowski. Questions or comments?
Motion carried.
Thank you. Item 9, special education. Our recommended action is that the Akron Central School Board of Education, upon the recommendation of Patrick D. McCabe, Superintendent of Schools, approve special education items consent 9A and 9B.
Move.
Move, Mrs. K.A.
Second.
Second, Ms. Forstell. Questions or comments?
Motion carried.
Thank you. Item 10, school board correspondence. Thursday, March 24th, the ECASB legislative team at Erie 1 BOCES from 6:30 to 8:30. Saturday, March 26th is the prospective school board member workshop from 8 to 10:30. That is also at Erie One BOCES. Item 11, upcoming dates. Friday, March 18th, Superintendent Conference Day, no school for the students. Friday, March 18th is All County Music Festival here from 3:30 to 9 for rehearsal. And Saturday, the 19th, is the Music Festival from 9 to 6 with the performances in the afternoon. Wednesday, March 23rd is the orchestra concert in the auditorium from 7 to 8:30. March 30th is our next regular Board of Business meeting here in the cafeteria. And Saturday, April 2nd, is the cabaret concert in gym number 1, 2 o'clock and 7 o'clock. Item 12, board discussion. Anything from the board members to bring up this evening? Item 13, executive session. We do have need to go into executive session for negotiations. If I could have a motion, please.
Moved.
Moved, Mr. Massey.
Second.
Second, Mr. Kenline. Questions or comments?
Motion carried.
Thank you. We're in executive session at 8:15. We do not anticipate conducting regular business after